We are live. Man, thank you so much for getting on here. I know I didn't give you a whole lot of lead time. Everything's in this season, man. It's fast and furious. And I thought I want to do some live broadcasts and videos. And Will Toler was the man at the top of the list. I thought if I'm going to, dude, you're a character. I love it. Well, I know I talked about wanting to get into a few topics today about some specific things. But before we get into that, I just want people to learn a little bit more about you. So I'll just give a little intro, but I'm not going to do it justice. I crossed paths with Will whenever I saw, gosh, dog, I think I just saw you on the news and was talking to people and all of a sudden I'm getting tagged in a post and saying, hey, you need to reach out to this guy. He's doing some incredible stuff. And so I called you. And at that time, I think that we were both just so busy, you just can't hardly see straight. And I just said, you know, Will, you're doing some incredible things. You're out there helping people protest their property tax values, but you were doing it on a level bigger than I was and bigger than anybody or deeper. You're like picking butt and taking names. And so I don't know, man. The heart that you have is just awesome. I want to give people an idea of who you are. So how did you tell me a little bit about your story? Tell me about how you got to be doing what you're doing and what brings you, how did you get to the point you're at today?
Easy. As you know, North Texas is a huge, it's a big-hearted volunteer community. So many people spend their free time finding a way to serve others and to find a way to better their neighborhood, better their community. What you and I have, and what many others do as well, but what you and I have is a really technical, specialized set of skills that our knowledge kind of isn't what everybody else knows. This property tax stuff is not easy to navigate on a really good day. When all your facts are straight, it's hard to navigate this stuff. And for a lot of people, they've never had to deal with it ever. And they might have owned their home 50 years. And this is the first time that their values have gone up. And they go, whoa, what do I do? And I found an underserved, underrepresented neighborhood. It just happened to be my next door neighbors, literally down the street. And when I showed up to help, everybody was so kind and so open. It was easy. All I had to do was be myself and be honest about what I told people, and the rest seems to be history.
How about that? And so you are helping a specific neighborhood. I want to get into that a little bit more later, but first tell me, like, how long have you been dealing with property taxes, and what were you doing before you started getting into what I know you for?
So my family has been my entire life. My father and my family have had a property tax consulting business. And so instead of having babysitters, we would go with dad to do property inspections. I was 16 or 17 when I went to my first lawsuit, not ARB hearing, lawsuit. And they were sitting there, and the appraiser was chiping in all these code references. Code section, this says this and this. And the judge said, okay, everybody open up your code book and let's read it together. And I was like, property taxes is an open book job? Sign me up. And watching my family do their work, as a young man, I was so privileged to grow up saying, ooh, I like this. I like the way that this job goes. But I realized I needed to get educated when I asked my dad, what's a tax rate and why do you care so much about it? What is an exemption and why do you care why were y'all talking about tax rates so much? After college, I told my father that I wanted to work with him, and he said, if you'll stay out of trouble and get a degree, you'll have a job. And the transition from for-profit to nonprofit came when Peter Johnson of South Dallas, part of South Oak Cliff, he was sent to Dallas by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And Dr. King and Peter had this saying that being white and being privileged is not a sin, but how you use your privilege could be a sin. And I decided that I was going to use my privilege for good. And that's when I found my neighbors in the historic Black neighborhood of Hamilton Park, just up the road from me. And again, the rest is history.
How about that? That's fascinating. All right. So you mentioned a guy named Peter Johnson, and then you mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King. This just blew me away because to me, I've just read about Martin Luther King in history books and that sort of thing. And then whenever I talk to you and you mentioned a personal connection with a guy that was friends with Martin Luther King and how all this goes, it kind of made it real. Like, wow, this is crazy. There's actually a guy that so what was, not to bunny trail too much, but this is just fascinating to me, and I suppose it'd probably be fascinating to other people. What's Peter Johnson's relationship again with Dr. Martin Luther King?
So civil rights era happened and stuff was happening all over the country. And Dr. King had a following and he was the leader, clear and presiding leader, but he had some really strong, capable individuals on his team. And one of the goals he set was, one of the plans he had was, Dr. King sent a pastor, a preacher, or a leader to almost every metro city. And Dallas got the kid in the bunch. His name is Peter Johnson. His father, I believed, helped start the NAACP. I should have that better in my citations, but let's just say Peter comes from a family that really, really believes in justice and fighting for others. It was in Peter's blood, kind of like it was in my blood to fight taxes. But man, Peter grew up around this stuff. And Dr. King sent Peter to Dallas. And ever since the civil rights era, that movement, we had law and reform and change. Ever since, Peter never left. He is stuck with Dallas. And the people who know him know exactly who he is. And he's humble and he's gentle and he doesn't boast and brag about himself. A lot of people have kind of never heard of him. And I'm not sure that's not exactly the way he wants it.
How about that? That's really wild. And so, did Peter Johnson just called you out of the blue? Is that
Absolutely.
how y'all got connected?
No way.
What happened?
Almost the opposite. I was thinking, man, this for-profit tax stuff, it's great, but I feel like I'm a young man and there's something out there that's more than this for me. And I went to an event where Peter was the presenting speaker. And he talked about his history with Dr. King and the civil rights movement and all these incredible stories. And at the end, the moderator said, "Oh, Peter, tell him about your property tax news story." And my father and I looked at each other like, no one has a property tax news story. Unless it's like my appeals were too high or protest, only that stuff. He did what I did. And he was my original, he lit the whole flame for me. His friend had a piece of land. It was vacant. They put a road in it, but they also put blueprints and put permits for this incredible commercial development that never got built. The Appraisal District taxed him on what should have been vacant land as these $1 million buildings. I mean, this guy's tax bill should have been 1,000 and it was like 10,000 or whatever. And it was for like years. So Peter got them to fix the roll past what the law actually kind of allowed. The law allows for you to have a 2-year look back. He got like a 6-year look back. And again, I don't think Will Toler could pull that off, but Peter Johnson can. And at the end of the article, he asked, and I'm quoting him, "What is a Black businessman supposed to do if they don't know Peter Johnson?" And I looked at my parents and my family and my siblings, and I was like, they should have called me. And that led an easy hill to walk down. Well, what are some Black businessmen? Who are some Black businessmen that I know? Hamilton Park. I looked at their values and what was going on. Their values had doubled, not one protest filed. Except for brand new homeowners. There were like 3 people who did that were the new buyers. But the rest of the 700 homes, not one protest.
How about that? That's just insane. And I've actually owned a property in South Dallas. And this is actually one of the things that started igniting my fire in the protests. Is I had a small house. It was like a $30,000 house or something in South Dallas. I went into protest, and there just weren't many sales. property values are, but once in a while they would tear down a house, they build a new one, and so that would be the only sale that they would have to go off of. And I'm sitting there fighting tooth and nail, bringing in the best evidence that I have, saying, look, you guys, this is totally wrong. And I'm a realtor. I know at least, real estate, so I can talk intelligently about it. And then I just thought, what about the people that don't have a background in real estate, that don't know how to pull the sales information? If it's all rentals, except for one or two nice homes, it's like, I understand. Also, the appraisal district kind of has a hard job because they don't have a lot of sales data. So how do you navigate this? And I just thought, man, people are getting screwed right and left. It's crazy. All right, so let me
pause you real quick. Mm-hmm. I have two perspectives on that one point, and I want to get into it more later. But the appraisal district has a hard job to do, and we've got to all work with them and come in and talk to them. And it's hard for your normal, regular person to know how to talk the talk. How do you come in and speak Latin if you've only ever learned English? And this tax stuff is Latin, and our job is to translate it.
Well, look, I want to talk more. I could talk forever about what you've done. You've helped a lot of people in a lot of ways, and that's how we got connected. I wanted people to understand the background. You've got a fascinating story. But let's get into some nuts and bolts property tax stuff. You mentioned that there was something going on, and honestly, I don't know that I really understand everything you were talking about, but there's something having to do with the homestead exemption, the 10% cap, with the new law, and how all this stuff is being affected right now, and what's going on with that. Man, just download on me and tell me what do I need to know in this subject that you're talking about.
Two different concepts, and they now overlap onto each other.
Okay.
The first one is the new law change. Every year you get a notice, and 30 days after the notices are released, you get to file a protest if you disagree. And it used to be, Will Toler receives a value notice, I got increased, I file a protest. Well, if they bumped me from 1 to 2, and I don't even think I'm worth 1, I think I'm worth 75 cents. If I go in and argue, they can bump me from 2 to 4. They could actually increase. So you go into the appraisal review board and you say, y'all took me to 100,000. I think I'm 75,000. And the appraisal district could rebuttal and say, we think you're 200,000. We're gonna increase you again. We know we noticed you. Now we're gonna raise you at the hearing. So now you're like, whoa. I'll take the one. What are y'all talking? A lot of people were scared to file protests. If you don't file valuation and appraisal is a game of check. It's a game of chess. You check somebody and they go, oh, you know what? I got to move my pieces back. You're right. Okay, thanks. And people were afraid to play the game. And so values started going off. What happened in Hamilton Park was they bumped them. No one protested. So DCAT was like, oh, that must not be enough. Let's bump them again. Bumped them. No one protested it. And it was the third bump when I finally showed up. And I show up, and what do you know, 2 years later, they haven't gotten one reappraisal. And I don't think it's because I did anything special. I think it's because this is a game of they move their piece and you have to move them back one. They move 2, you move back. And sometimes you get to move all the way back to your original spot. Sometimes you even get a decrease. Okay. So I rambled. Let me get back on point. They used to have a rule that said if you protest your value, the appraisal district can raise your value. They cut that. So if you got bumped from 75,000 to 100,000, your maximum value for the year could be 100. They can't increase it. So now let's talk about how homestead caps work. People think that the sentence is your homestead is capped at 10% a year. For every 3 years or a reappraisal or a read-in at the ARB, there's an asterisk in there that no one reads. And there's these things that happen that keep it at 10%. So I've got the numbers here on my sheet. My guy, now, and this is one of my for-profit guys, his mansion is worth $10.7 million. So we appealed his 10.7 and we got it to 10.7. 4 years go by and his value doesn't increase. But every year I filed an ARB protest and I had them just read in my protest. I wrote in a letter. I said, please submit this as my evidence as the ARB hearing. I didn't attend. I didn't show up. I just asked. It's called a read-in, and it's perfectly legal. My value was reset. My cap was reset. 10.7 the next year, 10.7 the next year, 10.7 the next year. If we hadn't have protested, it would have gone from 10.7 to 11.7 to 12.9 to 14.2, and they bumped him this year, and it would have been $15.2 million. His cap would have been, it wouldn't have been 10% of 10.7. It would have been 10% of 10.7, 10% of 11.7. The percent adds up for up to 3 years. So I saved my guy $75,000 in taxes on his mansion. Now, put that into perspective of your average normal person. Let's say it could have been $750. It could have been $7,000 for a regular normal home. A home that's $1 million in Dallas, maybe. And if it's this is real money. And all it took was an ARB protest. My guy took a risk, because what the DCAD could have done is say, okay, he doesn't think he's 10.7. Like we sent him a notice that said 10.7. Let's fight him. Let's say it's 15.2. I could have gotten in trouble. I didn't. I took a risk, and the risk never bit me in the butt. Now that this new law exists, every homeowner, every year for the rest of their lives, should receive their value notice and send in a protest form, and it should say, this is my evidence. And if you don't disagree with the value notice, if you think 10, like my guy, 10.7, that was reasonable. Everybody thought that was fair. Everybody was cool with it. Every year we just sent in a letter. We think the value is 10.7, read it in at the board. And they were like, well, we didn't increase you. What are you protesting? We don't care. We want you to read it in, because ARB protests, when the ARB rules on it, it's a whole new set. It's like the light turns green, or maybe it turns red. You can't increase. Let me see if I can sum that up real quick. Every year, now that the new law exists, homeowners should protest their taxes to protect their cap. Because every 3 years, if nothing happened to you for 3 years, then on the 4th year, your cap is not 10%, it's 30%. It's 10% each year. And each year you file a protest and you get an ARB hearing. Now, an ARB hearing can be an informal hearing. It can be a hearing in the lobby. It could be across the desk. But if informal, if you don't get a ruling, your cap amount can go up 10% each year for 3 years. So if he had gone on like this for 6 years, it wouldn't have been 60%. It would have been 30%. It's still only 30%.
Okay, man. You just blew my mind.
Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm going to just be honest with you. Well, the first thing I need to say is, if you didn't understand what he just said, it's okay. It's okay. Here's the point that you need to take home. If you don't understand what he just said, we can give the conclusion, which is what to do, which is you just told him, and we're going to give some specific instructions on exactly how to do that. I will also say this. This is the reason why you should hire a property tax consultant like Will. I'm just going to say, look, Will he understands the property tax law on a level beyond most people. And I will also say, I told him whenever he said, hey, I want to talk about this topic, I said, okay, I'm going to be learning too. Okay. Because this is interesting stuff. Because I wasn't aware of a couple of these things. I was aware of the conclusion, but this. So you mentioned a reappraisal thing. Before I want to hop right back into the weeds. I want to get involved in some of this nitty gritty, because I want to understand. And I think that there are a lot of people that are paying attention that are more educated than the average person, that they can handle some of the more complex stuff. But just before we go back into the nitty gritty, the final simple takeaway instructions is this. Let me just see if I can repeat this, and you correct me where I'm wrong. File what I would call an affidavit protest. And if you think your value is fair, just put the value that was on your value notice and say, I believe that the value of my property is whatever they noticed you at, whatever and when I say notice you, whatever the notified value was, put that on your affidavit protest and just have them read it in at a formal hearing. You don't have to show up. You don't have to do anything. And that will basically lock in your value and ensure that you're not going to have this massive jump once upon a time at some point. Is that right? Okay.
And it's all because the rule changed. There used to be huge risk in playing the game this way. And when the rule changed that the appraisal districts couldn't raise you more, so you'd get your notice, then you'd go to the hearing and they'd try and raise you more. Wow. When that rule changed, now this is the technique. Before, there are people that I didn't always protest every year. Sometimes I left them alone because I was like, ooh, I don't want to dive into that weed.
Yeah.
Now that risk is taken away, there's no reason not to do this. That I've seen. It's a brand new rule. I haven't seen a repercussion on this yet. And I can't see it. I don't see the worry.
I don't look, man. Here's the thing that blows my mind. Okay, you grew up in a family where y'all are doing these protests for a fee. I honestly don't understand how you're making a fee off of keeping someone's value the same. But I'll also say this: there aren't many people out there that are willing to give this advice that's going to teach people how to help themselves and keep them from having massive increases, because nobody makes money off of this. This is like inside information that nobody profits from. It's just incredible. All right, man. In Tarrant County, I would call this an affidavit protest. You called it a read-in. Okay.
Same thing. Same thing.
Okay. If I call it an affidavit protest, do you think that that's language that anybody in any county could take to their appraisal district and say, how do I file an affidavit protest? And they give them information on it?
Affidavit is a legal term of a sworn written statement. And when you go to the board, you make sworn statements. So everybody should understand that. On your protest forms, it asks generally, the good appraisal districts say, do you want to have a phone call? Do you want to have an in-person meeting? Do you want to have an online? Do you want to do it? How do you want to do it? And there is generally a way, and every appraisal district's different, but there is generally a way to have what I call a read-in, what you call an affidavit, same thing.
Okay. So, all right. Very good. All right. So what's happening is the Texas introduced a law that now says that they can't raise the value in a protest. They can't go in and magically raise the value. If you go in and protest and there's evidence on the table that shows that the value should be increased, you now the fear of them going in and saying, well, we've got evidence that not only are we not going to lower your value, but we're actually going to increase it. Now it's illegal for them to do that. And so you're saying, let's go ahead and file the protest, just affirming whatever the value is, and then they can't raise it. And then because of another provision of the law, now they say you have to have clear and convincing evidence or whatever, or they're not going to increase it. So just the way that the laws read, that will basically keep your value locked in for multiple years in a row.
The system only works when the appraisal district works with taxpayers, and agents like us are representing taxpayers. And the fear used to be, ooh, agent, if you go in and talk on my behalf, they could take me from 10 to 11. Now they can't do that. There is now no risk of filing a protest.
Awesome. That's a great message. All right, man. You mentioned something that's kind of interesting. You're saying in the past, whenever they have a reappraisal year, that they could then basically make up for lost time, and instead of just making up for, instead of a 10% increase in 1 year, it could be like a cumulative, like recapture of the past 3 years and add it all together.
No,
the word recaptures maybe
no, not okay. So value is unlimited, and value comes before exemptions. So there is the value, and let's just use the number 100. Your value is 100, but your homestead caps your value, which is why it's called a homestead cap, at 75. It's not at 100, it's a 75. And the theory was your homestead cap can never increase more than 10%. But there's the asterisk is, unless you do stuff like go to the ARB, And if you don't, it's 10% every year for 3 years. So for example, my guy, his cap was held him at 10.7.
Gotcha.
Then it would have got, and because we it's called resetting the cap. You reset your cap to your original cap number every year you file a protest. So let me can you see this?
Again. Yep.
That is what my guy's taxes.
Hold on. Give me 1 second. I'm going to. All right. Well, I was going to try and give you the full screen, but it's not going to let me do it really. All right. So
this is what it would have looked like if my guy had not filed if we hadn't have filed a protest. See how his cap stayed at 10.7? 10.7, 10.7. They raised his value to 15.2, but now his I'm over here. Now whatever. His cap this year in 2020 is not 15.2, it's 11.7. But if we hadn't have filed protests, it would have been trickling up all this time, and now his cap would be 15.2.
Holy mackerel.
So
Awesome.
so this is the example of why you should go protest every year, even if they don't increase you, because your cap might not increase it might not go up 10% every year. If you don't get raised, you don't think you're getting your 10% increase. But if in 3 years they quadruple you, your cap hits 30%, not 10%.
Got it. Man, that's awesome.
15.2 is 30% of 10.7, or maybe it's 14.2, but one of those numbers is the accumulation of all those 10.2s adding up. This is why you need to protest. My guy is now at 11.7 instead of at 15.2.
Got it. All right. That's brilliant. Hey, I want to shift gears. That we didn't talk about that we were going to get into this, but you were talking in previous conversations we've had about how you'll go in and protest, and instead of just getting their value down a little bit and making it and basically having a remedy that lasts 1 year, you like to protest in a way that's going to create a permanent change and save them just tons and tons of money year over year over year. And it's more of a permanent change. I mean, they can always come back in and redo things, but it just creates more of a lasting change. And I would love for you to elaborate on that if you're willing to.
What do you know? The appraisal district threw that back in my face. So all that matters is the word market value. How you calculate market value just has to be under the it's called USPAP. It just has to follow the procedures and the rules. Universal standards of procedures, appraisal and USPAP.
Very good. You nailed it. That's it.
Almost. So everything that leads up to everything before the equal sign is values and exemptions and rates and all that. And after the equal sign is market value. And all they have to do is hit the bullseye on market value. And then there's this thing, equity is, are you inside the standard deviation of what's defined as equitable? Equity is not a word, it's a legal math term. And equity is a, what's this graph called?
Distribution of bell curve.
Bell curve, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If it's within the median bell curve, their number is right. It does. All they have to do is hit the bell curve. And my approach was don't go in and talk market approach. Mine was go in and talk cost approach, talk depreciation, talk condition of home. And what happened is I'm going to have a fun time this year doing my work. DCAD put them back at market and eliminated my depreciation schedule. The theory is a lot of homes in Dallas are older than my grandmother, and they need new hips and new knees and a facelift. And sorry for the bad analogy, but they need.
You're talking about the property, not the homeowner, right?
I'm talking about the property. Absolutely. Okay. Let's get. Oh, sorry. They need new roofs. They need new gutters. They need new windows. The water heater's outdated. The bathtub is 60 years old. All this stuff. It needs to be replaced. And when I first did that, it changed the amount of depreciation. It didn't change the market value. The market value of the home was $100,000, but I got them an 80% depreciation discount. And this year they popped some of my people and tried to put them back up to market. And I'm still running my graph. Is my whole neighborhood equitable? Did they raise them back up with my neighbors, or did they raise everybody? Did they raise everybody 10%, or did they try and match my people? I'm still doing my research on that. The theory is market value approaches should really come down to this in home and be owning a home. What sold in your neighborhood? How is it similar and different to you? If somebody sold and they used that sale against you, are they 2-story and you 1-story? Are they a new build and you're an old build? Are they a remodel and you're not? Do they have marble and you have wood? Do they, are they pier and beam and you're slab? What are the differences? What is the value of those differences? That's one approach to value. And a lot of people just say, look, they sold, this is what equity is, and boom, that's what it is. My approach really was, this is what my home looks like compared to the people who sold. I need a discount. They are brand new and I am not. Almost all of my clients have lived in their homes for 50, 60, 70 years. And the people that they're being compared to are brand new builds. And I think that should be categorically illegal, but it's not. 2301D says that you can only protest, you can't compare non-homestead properties to other non-homestead properties. And I wish they would update that to make a better provision that if you're a new home, you shouldn't be affecting old homes, my opinion.
Okay. That the provision of the law says you can't compare a non-homestead property to other non-homestead properties.
You can't compare a bank to a house.
Okay. You're saying so different type, like a commercial to a residential.
They have that law, and they don't. What's happening all over the country is that old homes are either being torn down or gutted, and it's affecting the price of old homes. And old homes are feeling the brunt of it a little too strongly. The old homes should be getting a bigger discount and we should all be looking around saying, no one wants an 80-year-old home. They want to gut. They either want to clean it up or they want to tear it down. And too many people, they're getting the market value right, but they aren't finishing out the equation. They forgot the division. There's a division sign in there somewhere that they're not doing right. I brought the division in.
Gotcha. Awesome. And so I would say for, like you mentioned some things that are high level property tax stuff, like you're talking about the cost approach versus the market value approach, and that stuff gets really complex, and trying to figure out exactly how to do a depreciation schedule and all that. I would say for the average person that's going in doing a protest, they can accomplish much of the same goal or objective if they just go in and say, look, you've classified my property as good condition when I think it should be fair condition. And if you bring in the evidence to do that, you've in effect done basically the same kind of thing. Would you agree with that?
When you bring it in and say it's only fair, you better have an example of who they said is fair. When I came, one of my homes was listed as actually very poor. And when I came in and said, I want it very poor, they were like, no way. And I showed them a picture. This is what very poor looks like. This is what I look like. What's the difference? And he couldn't tell me, so he gave me my number. If they say you're good and you say you're fair, you better know what fair is, because that's incredibly opinionated. There is no law, there is no calculation on what that, and that's why the only number that matters is market value. All that other stuff is opinion based, and they can throw you under the bus on opinion. My suggestion to everybody is always this: look at who they're comparing you to and break it down. And if you have to reach to explain the differences, you probably don't have a case. But when they compared my Aunt Kim in Austin, her 1-story, 60-year-old house, to a brand new 2-story mansion, we were like, "Ooh, we got this. This is going to be easy. This is anybody could argue that." I'm not a 2-story. I'm not a 3,000 square foot house. I'm a 1,000 square foot house. Hello, they got walk-in showers. I only have one shower. Those were obvious discrepancies, and DCAT is better at it than that. And your real job should just be try and understand your neighborhood. But my opinion is it's really hard when you're a regular old person to do it all on your own. Most people go so far when they're able to get one resource, one piece of advice from a consultant like us. Every time I get a phone call and the person doesn't hire me, they do their own thing. I told them one thing that they were like, "Ooh, I know how to make that apply for my house. I got it now." Sometimes I'll send them a little graph of some info, maybe a chart on this or that, and they go, "Wow, that totally got me over the edge."
Hmm.
Most people cannot do it alone, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, something that you've mentioned or kind of talked about without really saying it exactly is that, and this is where a lot of realtors go wrong when they have with wonderful intentions try to help a homeowner go into protest. What most people don't understand that don't do it all the time is that when you go into protest, let's just say you went to a realtor and got comps and you go into protest, most people will just bring those comps, and on the comp sheet it has photos, it has amenities, it has all sorts of stuff about what's been upgraded inside and outside and all sorts of different things. And but when the appraisal district comes in to with their evidence, most of the time it's just black and white text. You don't know if it's one story or two story. You don't know, if there's a rain gutter next to the property or if anything's been fixed up. I mean, there's so much information that's not there. And the 3-person panel, the jury, for lack of a better term, they're there to make a decision on the evidence that's presented. And what happens is the homeowner goes in with a truckload of evidence that doesn't really support the conclusion that they're trying to accomplish. And then the appraisal district doesn't have anything that confuses the argument. So it may not be quality data, but yet it fits within the parameters that the appraisal district has lined out. They know how to speak the language. They know how to play the game. And the guy coming in may have done a better job, may have had more information, but it doesn't fit inside this neat, nice, tidy little box that they've drawn. So nothing happens. And it drives me nuts. And that's one of the things that's motivated me to go a little deeper, is because I got tired of losing. It's like, you know what? I got to figure this thing out and then help some people. And then, I talk to guys like you that have generously helped me. So
it drove you nuts. Did you sue him?
No, I didn't. I haven't taken it that far.
My first question for every homeowner that is not one of my one of my vulnerable families, one of my real families that are at risk and at need. I've had a church member come up to me and, "Hey, Will, I need help with my house." Sure, no problem. They were appraised at let's just call it $1 million. They had a $1 million appraisal, and I asked them, and I was like, and they were thinking about putting it on the market. "So what are you thinking about selling it for? 2?" And I was like, well, wait a minute. If they put you at 1 and you're thinking about selling it for 2, you probably don't have a very good case. They're like, "Yeah, just 1 seems high." And I was like, "Well, then why are you going to sell it for 2? Because it's like that over the weekend." Well,
Yeah.
then you don't. A lot of people aren't like that, though. Your normal, regular person that's living in Texas really, really needs to bring evidence into their appraisal district so that the appraisal district can fact check everything. Show me what your bathroom looks like. Show me what your kitchen looks like. Show me what your utensils. Show me your water heater. Did your pool crack last year and you had to do control? But the appraisal districts have access to the permits you've pulled to build your home. They know what your house generally looks like, generally. And when you do work on it, they generally know what you did. And the part of your job as a homeowner is to help them make sure their number is right. I think it's worth going in and talking to an appraiser every year informally, because you might get 10% off just for helping them understand your house better. It's happened all the time. Just someone shows up and they just get a discount. And I show up, I'm like, where's my 10% discount? But it's a game that when you play it with respect, the appraisal districts generally want to work with you. And sometimes you get a hard appraiser and sometimes you don't. But generally, they're wanting to get the right number. My job is I don't lose at the ARB and settle. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's it. That's all I got. It's time to pay the bill now. So I'm gonna write my check and move on with my life. I spent my time at the ARB, blah, blah, blah." And I take it the next step and I file, if I think I have a case, I file a lawsuit. It's called a Chapter 42. You get a chance to litigate, arbitrate, mediate, have settlement hearings. And I have a case on behalf of an entire neighborhood in Dallas that the entire neighborhood is double overvalued. So I have a chance to change 500 families' values and cut them in half.
That's incredible.
But your normal person can't pull that off.
Okay.
And I'm not sorry.
No, you're doing good, man. This is awesome. Let me ask you this, because a lot of people just heard that it's possible to file a lawsuit, and then other people are out there thinking about arbitration, and so there's a difference there. Tell me what's the difference, and what's the same? How do people get go deeper on that one for me, if you don't mind?
You go to the ARB. So first you file a protest. Then most people go in without a meeting. It's called an informal. They just drive up, they say hello, they try and talk to an appraiser. They're normally back in their cubicle area. They're sitting at the appraiser's desk. Then you go to the ARB. That's the formal hearing. I believe that's a 41. That's chapter 41. And so then you lose at ARB. Let's say that you lose at ARB, or maybe you don't withdraw your settlement. You don't agree to their number. So then you can file a chapter 42, which is what I just blatantly call a lawsuit. That's my joke of, did you sue them? Did you file a 42? You can go to court. You can request a jury trial. And before you do that, and also the trial is trial de novo. It doesn't matter if you went to ARB and said my value is 1 million. You can now go into the new trial and say it's only worth 5,000. When you go do the lawsuit, you can come up with you can have a whole new game plan when you go trial de novo. It's where if you have a real case and the district won't work with you, which is rare, if you have a real case, chapter 42 is your path. You can file a chapter 42 on almost anything that you receive a letter on. If they yank your exemption, you can sue them. If they forget to give you a refund, you can sue them. Everything in property taxes is they take adverse action against you. They have to send you a letter. Then you get to appeal it all the way up to a lawsuit. And the lawsuit is, do you go to court and have a jury trial or a judge trial? And does the court first make you go to mediation? And then do you have to do settlement agreements? Is basically how I understand it.
Gotcha. How does the average Joe file the lawsuit? Should they call? I mean, is this something somebody can do on their own if they want to, or do they have to call an attorney, or what would be the first step on that?
Remember, I don't know if you ever watched Law and Order, but you're allowed to represent yourself in trial. It's not a good idea. The amount of court documents that you receive need a specialized set of skills. Your average Joe homeowner is not ready for a 42. I had a lawyer help me with my lawsuit coming up for this neighborhood in Dallas. University of Texas called it the most gentrified neighborhood in Texas, which I think is a big deal. And there, even some of this legal stuff for me is complicated. I couldn't imagine being one of my homeowners trying to go to court on this matter. I'm not saying they're not. It's not possible, but it is. I wouldn't advise it.
Let's go back to. I want to just comment on something that you said earlier. Is I completely agree, and then we'll go to. I want to talk more about some of the data. All right. So you were mentioning that the appraisal district usually wants to work with you, and I couldn't agree more. I've said before, and I truly believe this. The most of the people that I'm talking to at the appraisal district, they're looking for an excuse to give you a reduction. You just have to present the evidence that allows them to do that, especially when they're talking with a homeowner. If you just know how to present the evidence that fits inside the box of what they're willing to consider, they will consider it, and they'll give you that whatever consideration. I feel like where a lot of people go wrong is they don't have the evidence. They show up to the appraisal district. They're mean to them. They're not using any evidence. So then the appraisal district employee is thinking they're just tired of getting beat to death with this and dealing with somebody that hasn't taken the time to figure out how to fit everything in the box. And it's like it's a system that has a lot of problems and rough edges. But I would agree with you that if you just know how to present the data in the right way, then they'll they'll usually give it consideration. So with that being said, part of the challenge is knowing how to present that data in the right way, knowing how to get it to fit inside that box. And there are some unwritten rules. We touched on it a little earlier with the quality and condition labels. It's very subjective. It's difficult to know how to argue what's good, fair, poor, very good, or whatever, and to know how to argue those things. Let me ask you this. In Dallas County, do they have something called the effective year built and the year built? Do they have those two different numbers? Yep. So if somebody's got a home that's built in 1950 and they go into protest and the appraisal district knows that there have been tons of permits pulled on the different comps, and then you go in and you try and argue using other houses built in 1950, but they say, well, I'm sorry, the effective year of one property doesn't match the effective year of the other, but you're sitting there looking at the year built on all these is 1950. How is I supposed to know this stuff? Like, how's a homeowner arm themselves to be able to figure out the effective year on this stuff, or can they? What's your advice in that area?
Effective year to me is another way of saying what is the depreciation.
Okay.
So depreciation is two factors: condition and year. And I think Marshall and Swift carries the depreciation schedule that is most commonly used, and it's like excellent, very good, good, average, fair, poor, very poor, undesirable. And then it's like 0 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, so on and so forth. And you get a discount per year. The older you are, you get a discount, and the worse condition you are, you get a discount. So there are homes in Dallas that are 50 years old that are in very good condition. There are no cracks. There were no termites. There were, an excellent condition. There are also 50-year-old homes that are falling apart and have holes in the wall. And so those would be in very poor condition or whatever. If you go in, so my Aunt Kim, first she was getting compared to to brand new houses, and then she decided, you know what, if I'm going to get compared to it, I'm going to gut my bathroom. I'm going to do a new kitchen, new bathroom. And they took her house that was built in 1950 and called it a house that was built in 2000. They didn't take her all the way up to the brand new year because she didn't do a new roof. She didn't do new windows. She didn't do a new door. She just did her bathroom and her kitchen, and she did her floor because she had a dog and the dog ripped up the wood floor. They calculated that her new year on that Marshall and Swift scale, it's not a 50-year-old house. It's a 20-year-old house. They bumped her depreciation percentage up. That is what effective year is. Year matters on the concept of depreciation. If you're 50-year-old, you get 50%. And if you're 20-year-old, you get 20%. And when you do a remodel and a refurbish, you're bumping your age back up to 0. And only if you do a rebuild, if you gut it to the stud, you'll probably get a brand new build.
All right. Well, if a homeowner is preparing to do their own protest and they've got comps, they understand quite a bit about the process, but I don't know anywhere where the effective year is really advertised. How are they supposed to know if their property how are they supposed to know what the appraisal district thinks is the effective year of their property, and how are they supposed to know what the effective year of any of the comps are?
On DCAD, I think it's on the website.
It's just posted right on the website. Gotcha.
Let me pull that up real quick. I'm looking.
I bet you're right. I know in Tarrant County you can do a data download. Yep. And that information is on there, but it's a massive file, and the average person I feel like it's a little bit crazy to think that the average person can do that. And without a standard, way to go about measuring that or identifying that, I think it's a little bit difficult. I'll tell you what,
Chandler, they got it on DCAD. It's
okay, on DCAD they do?
Yeah. All right. Effective and actual. But how are you are allowed to request the appraisal district's evidence that they are going to submit at your ARB hearing. The problem is like I experienced at my very first ever hearing in Waco, McLennan County, they can switch the evidence 3 seconds before the hearing. And if they do that, you have the right to ask for a reschedule. Hey, they brought in new evidence. I haven't had the opportunity to review it, and you have to reschedule your hearing. I called my boss, and I was like, hey, Dad, they changed my evidence. What do I do? Oh my gosh, this is my first hearing. And he was like, I don't care. go with what you said. And so I had all this evidence for all these cases, all these properties that weren't relevant to our case. You have the right to ask for their evidence. The reason you have the right to ask for their evidence is because only in property taxes is the burden of proof on the appraisal district. They get to use that burden of proof and say, look, we followed the rules. And if they follow the rules, they're okay. And when they follow the rules, you all of a sudden have to basically prove them wrong. When you go to trial, when you file a 42, which costs time and money, all of a sudden, they better start looking a little smarter. When you're at the ARB, you're sort of at the mercy of the appraisal district can say, look, we have a policy, we have a procedure. Our procedure says this. We treated everybody the same way. End of story.
How about that?
And at that level, you're sort of at their mercy.
You know, right. That's one thing that is, I feel like it's unfair. You're going to negotiate in their environment, under their roof, with their people and all that. But I would say most people that have a legitimate gripe, it's not with the people at the appraisal district or even the appraisal district. It's with the property tax code itself. That's the biggest enemy of this whole thing. Not knowing the rules, not having the education. Hey, Will, before we bunny trail on something else, I just want to see if there's anything else that you, any topic, property tax related, if there's anything else you just feel like you feel like people should know, or anything else you want to talk about, because you are often different nooks and crannies than I am. And I'm just curious. Every time I ask you or you get going, you have a great story for something.
Nothing in the world riles people up more than paying property taxes. You're telling me I have to pay taxes on something I've owned for a long time? That doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. But I enjoy the services that I know I'm provided that through my property taxes. I am not anti-property taxes. I want the right number. I want everybody to only pay what they're supposed to pay. And I have not yet, and I don't plan to, I've not yet broken a law for any of my clients. What I have done is used the law to the advantage of my client, just like the law is written. And it's funny because a lot of people will talk to me about taxes and they'll say, it shouldn't be that way. And my response is, okay, did you talk to your legislator? Did you talk to your elected officials? All this stuff is able to be changed. And if you've got a problem with something, do a little bit of research. It is all online. It is all on the code. If you want to learn how the law works, hcad.org, harriscounty.org has the best 3-bullet way to do research. They've got in their help section a laws and rules page, and it has the Constitution and the code, and there's one the rules and procedures. If you want to understand what your situation is, hcad.org has the best reference, because it's not just Googling it. It is literally the code. It is literally the rules. And take a moment and learn and read. It's hard. It's not easy. This is why I have a job, is because I know how to do this stuff. But a lot of times people think this is how it should be, and somebody made a law that made it the way it is. And if you don't like the way it is, let's talk about it and let's change it. But in the meantime, I hear a lot of concerns and problems that people experience, and I go, wait, don't you know there's this rule that can help you? Don't you know there's this exemption? Don't you know that there's this path? And if you're struggling, if something is hurting your comfort, if you're losing sleep, if you're at your wit's end over these technical difficulties that are property taxes, talk to somebody who's an expert, or open up the code like I do and read a part. It's hard. It's a big book. But this stuff is not rocket science. It's tax science. And in your normal if you've got a high school education or higher, there's most of this stuff that you can read and understand. It's highly technical. A lot of the words are hard to understand, but your normal regular person should be able to if I gave somebody what the code says, a lot of times even judges are like, man, this stuff is hard to understand. But you talk to you talk to a chandler, you talk to a realtor, and you ask them real actual questions, a lot of times you can find a way to understand it. My job is to translate highly technical, dry, boring language into ways that normal, regular people can use. And your normal, regular person is not geared up to read the code and read the law and interpret it. But you can. And too many people won't.
Let's do this. Can you, how much time you got? Can you
Tell
hang
me
on?
what.
Can
Yeah.
you? All right, let's do maybe 30 more minutes. It's kind of a
Sounds
lot. We're going crazy with property taxes. I just want to get a chance to answer some questions. But before we do that, I know that people are going to hop off of here, but we've got some really interesting questions. Before we do that, what kind of clients or who can you help? How should people get in contact with you? And what kind of clients are you looking for? Or who can you help? Or are you maxed out this year?
You created a new code section, which before I met you, I called the Will Toler law because I didn't know you yet. 6.16 in the code. Chapter 6 is about local administration, and 0.16 means it's Chapter 6, paragraph 16. And in local administration is like the appraisal district and stuff like that. The appraisal district may, I hate that word, may, should be shall. I hate the word may and shall. The appraisal district may maintain a list of pro bono or nonprofit service providers, consultants. And Chandler helped put that code into place. And I am proud to say I was the first one to get registered in Tarrant County.
You certainly were.
And I have gotten more phone calls from people saying, "Hey, Will, I saw your name on the Tarrant website, and my phone number is on my page. I answer my cell phone, not my office, not my email. If you want to talk to me, call my cell." And I got to admit, all the questions I've had in Tarrant have been easy to deal with over the phone. "Oh yeah, you just need to blank." "Oh, I can handle that. No problem. Thank you so much." My work in Dallas has been so on hands and personal that DCAD changed their policy that no longer are they allowing, and it's because of the time of Corona, I can't go into DCAD anymore. I literally cannot walk through their door, and I'm not going to be able to help people if I can't sit them in front of an appraiser. I'm actually kind of afraid, what has Corona done to my nonprofit work? My opinion is I'm ready for a phone call just about any day of the week. And I ask that people allow me to sleep between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m. And if you give me a call and give me a day to get back with you, almost everybody who has reached out to me has had a response and has left thanking me and singing my praises. And I'll take all the compliments I can get. But call somebody. And there's that list on there. Chandler and I are both on there. Find somebody who's able to give you a little bit of good, solid advice. And then don't be afraid to fact check it. Call the appraisal district. Ask them, "Hey, does this sound right to you?" There you go. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Yeah, you're bold. I would. Let's see here. Let's do this right here. We've got a comment. Michelle says, "So talking about property taxes. This was in the beginning. We were talking about just giving some background. People got impatient. Come on, folks, settle down. You got Will here. He's done some amazing stuff. I want y'all to get to know him. Anyway, he says, how come major corporations can avoid so much in property taxes through the ag exemption by having a couple cows on your property?"
Because the law says they can.
There you go. Property again. The enemy is the property tax code. That's if you got it right.
Hold on, Michelle. Do they always only have a couple of cows? Do they ever? So appraisers have shown me pictures of what it's like to look at an ag exemption at an ag exempt property from the street, and they've looked at my clients' properties, and they've gone, "Look, you've only got 2 cows." And I'm like, "Okay, did you look at my backyard where I've got 400 cows? I've got hundreds of pounds of live livestock back there. You just don't see them in the back." But Michelle, your question is incredibly valid. People deal with it all the time, and if we have a problem with this, we need to talk to the legislature. I don't think you're off point at all. I think you're right on track. I just know I've been told that my clients were that, and we laughed because I've walked through their cow barn. But Michelle, so many people, if you have rules, someone's gonna break it. Someone's gonna abuse it. And unfortunately, the ag exemption is probably the easiest one to abuse. And what reform is there? That's not something I put a lot of thought into. Maybe I need to, but I don't have a good answer for you, Michelle. And I'm sad that that's happening. But I also know the flip side of that, where my guy was accused of only having 2 cows and he had more than 400. My experience.
Leah says, is there any way to go back years to get the 10% retroactively, or is it only for the future?
Hi, Lee. Your homestead is for the current year and the prior to, on the condition that you qualified on January 1st of the prior 2 years. So this year is 2020. Let's say I've owned my house for all years I've been alive, which I'm not going to tell you all my age. So I've owned my house for a couple of decades, and I have never gotten my homestead. It's 2020. I was the owner. I occupied it. I could apply to get 2020, 2019, and 2018. Then 2018 becomes my homestead cap. Let's say it doubled every year, went from 10,000 to 20,000 to 40,000. My homestead cap would be set at 10. Then it could only go up to 12 or 11. Then it could only go up to 12. And then my value might have gone to 40, but you do get that 10% back because it's retroactive for only 2 years. The answer is yes, there is absolutely a way, but you had to have qualified in the past. So if you buy a new home, you don't get retroactive years. You only get the current year. Here's the other issue that a lot of people experience. And this is something that we need to talk to litigators about. You can only go back 2 years. The appraisal district can go back 5. They can yank your exemption for 5 years, and you can't even present evidence on it. You can't even say, whoa, let me reapply. If you lose those past 3 years, they're out. So take very, very good care of how your title and your and your exemptions work. Don't ever be afraid to just pop into your appraisal district and say, hey, can we just do a quick, do it in like September when the season's over and everything's going smooth. Go in and say, hey, I want to do a quick fact check. Do y'all have any questions about anything? Do y'all need to ask me anything? The answer to your question, Lee, is there a way to go back 10 years retroactive or 10% retroactively? Yes. You fill out the homestead form. You click General Residence Homestead. If you are also disabled or over 65, you can get those years, those exemptions for the current year and prior to. And some on the DCAD page, I don't know the Tarrant as well. There's a box to ask for retroactive years. You have to check that box. On DCAD, I know exactly where the box is. It's almost towards the bottom. But it's do you want a homestead for the current year? Do you want your over 65 or disability exemption for the current year? And do you want to apply them for prior years? And you have to mark in what your prior years are. I hope that answers Lee's question.
I think it does. This is an easy one, but we threw out some terminology that people are not used to hearing. And I think this year it should be a huge year for the affidavit protests because people aren't going in person. They can't. And I've heard that, you've got in Dallas, they may have a 1-person panel instead of a 3-person panel, but I've heard that this is only if everybody consents to it. So if you don't want to consent to that, I wonder if this is an option for you to go down. Do you know the answer on that, Will? If you don't consent to a 1-person panel, will you get a 3-person panel on an affidavit process?
I have no ability to, in good faith, answer that question.
Okay.
So the word on the street is, think about who your ARB members are. Almost all of them are retirees. And the word on the street is that the ARBs all over Texas, they had like 300 people that were on the ARB or 30 or whatever, and they have like 2 now. The number of counties that have just like, they've lost like 90% of their board members. That's just the word on the street. That I don't have any facts. I don't have a news report on that. That's just what I've heard. Is the days of going in person might very well be over, at least for the near future. So your question, Linda, is a different question though. Is an ARB protest an affidavit protest? No. ARB protests are in 41. Chapter 41 of the code, at the very end of the code, is a way to remedy, a way to correct what you think is bad value or bad appraisal. And there are different ways to be heard by the ARB. You can first go in informally, which Chandler and I both strongly suggest, but then you can be heard in different ways. Over the telephone, in written letter, which is like an affidavit. I call it a write-in. It's an affidavit. Sworn written statement. You can have it online, and DCAD people do it online all the time. And then you can do it in person. And Chandler was talking a little bit about what does it mean to do an in-person these days, because DCAD, as the law says in the code, you have to have at least a 3-person board, and now that's not going to be possible. And I don't know Chandler's question. I don't know the answer to. Can you appeal having a 1-person board? Not going to touch that one. I don't know the answer. I couldn't say in good faith. But Linda, your question is, you file an ARB protest, which is called a Chapter 41, and you get to decide how it's heard. And there are multiple different ways, and every appraisal district has different rules on that. The code says what they can do, and appraisal districts choose what they will do. There's a little bit of discrepancy there, and we need to work on that.
Good stuff, man. We don't have a whole lot of other unique questions. I just want to say this, and I want to see if you agree with it, and then we can wrap it up. Let's see here. Sorry, I got distraction with the question. Just want to make sure. All right. So, Will, I believe this year that the appraisal district is, at least in Tarrant County, I should say, the appraisal district seems like they have taken substantial measures to try to not increase values any more than they absolutely have to. It seemed to me like they were looking for every excuse to keep the values the same or even reduce. There's still a bunch that they increased, but it wasn't near as much as years past. And I believe that if you feel like your value is unfair, that the appraisal district in Tarrant County is likely maybe even more willing to agree to a reduction just to avoid the formal protest. Have you seen the same kind of measures happen in Dallas County? And what do you think about their willingness to negotiate?
Values were released in Dallas 3 days ago, and I'm still, I'm like this far above the water of researching all my data. My opinion is a lot of people have a different perspective on this than I do. I hope I'm going to answer your question, Chandler. But my perspective is Corona hit the world before January 1st. America was slow to react. The World Health Organization said that Corona was a worldwide pandemic before January 1st. And I think that's the best evidence that anybody could ever have to appeal their protest, to appeal their values. I think you should file a protest every year, no matter what, just to make sure that everything is squared away, just to check in on the appraisal district. But I've heard it both ways, Chandler. I've heard in some counties that appraisal districts are giving people tons of passes, and I've heard it the other way. And in other states, because appraisal is a countrywide thing, Texas just has the best rules. And for all the people that say that our rules stink, go to New York, go to Georgia, go to Colorado. Tell me how their rules are. In California, you file a protest and they're like, "Why are you here? What are you doing?" Anyways, wanted to get that off my chest. It's really, really hard to categorize it because it's so early. It just happened in Dallas 3 days ago. A lot of my neighborhoods are inconsistent, and I'm confused at what I'm seeing. It looks like normally they it's called mass appraisal. They throw a big blanket on everybody, and they cover everybody with the same blanket. And for the first time, I see 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s. And that's not how DCAD normally does it. And I'm trying to come up with how I feel about that. I don't have an opinion.
No, that's good. I didn't realize it was quite that fresh. But that's good stuff, man. Yeah, and I would just say,
can we talk about notices real quick?
Go for it.
May 15th is not a deadline anywhere in the tax code. Nowhere does it say May 15th. I actually think it literally does not say May 15th. The deadline to protest is 30 days after notices are sent, not received, sent. The moment they are posted, you have 30 days. And every day they cannot send notices before April 15th. So that created this concept that everybody thought, oh, May 15th is the deadline. No, it's not. The protest, the deadline can't be before May 15th because May 15th is the first day that's 30 days after April 15th. The appraisal districts could decide we're not going to send out notices till June. They'd be crazy to do that. But if they send it out June 1st, the protest deadline is July 1st. In Dallas, they sent them out May 15th, which makes the protest deadline June 15th.
How
30.
about that?
It's 30 days. It's not a deadline.
Let me show you something here. This is crazy. Check this out. Mr. Stevenson says Ken Paxton has issued an opinion that appraisal boards have to allow in-person protests as of May 11th. Thanks for that scoop. I haven't verified that, but I mean,
Mr. Stevenson, post it. Show me the order.
Yeah.
Show me that. I'd love to see that.
I tell you what. Wow.
I'd love to see that.
We're entering such an interesting time for politically, where the economic environment and the health environment and the power of the government and the power of the people and fair taxation and people's wallets and real life day-to-day issues. It's all there's just such a web of conflict and stress that's being brewed. And I would just say this. I have met people on both sides of the fence that we have different perspectives politically. We have different agendas. And the cool thing about property taxes is this is an area that we should all be able to come together on, because whether you are, it doesn't matter who you are, fair taxation should be the goal here, and a system that we can all navigate, and getting the information out about how to navigate that system is something that's important, and everybody should care about it. And so the guy that helped me the guy that I helped was Representative Matt Krause. He's Republican, but I'll tell you this, whenever I sat down to talk to him, it did not matter. We weren't talking conservative values. We weren't talking liberal values. We were talking about what's right for people, and we see people in pain in an unfair system that needs tweaking. And I'll go back to what Will just said. Look, things may not be perfect here. They're far from perfect, but we're still better than everybody else. All right. So we just need to continue doing what we're doing. And I think that this is probably the reason why. We just got to keep playing an active role. Will, man, I can't thank you enough for getting on here and willing to share this stuff. What you get into is not the same old property tax 101 type of vanilla stuff. You're going deep. There's some inside scoop. I guarantee if property tax consultants were watching this, they took something out of what you said. Man, I just can't thank you enough for what you're doing for the people there in Dallas and everywhere. Whoever you're helping, there are just not many people like you walking around, man. It is an absolute honor to talk with you, and can't thank you enough. Any last words before we get off?
The system is made for you, people, not for me and Chandler. It's made for you. If you don't like it, let's fix it. I love our tax system because you get to have a voice, but you have to speak up. And part of it is just having the courage and knowledge to speak up. But if you think that there's a real problem, to my question about ag people who only have 2 cows, if we've got a problem with ag, let's fix ag. But I really believe that our tax system is a really good one. It's just not all the way there yet. We've got a little bit more to go. And it's going to be ever evolving. Let's make it good for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with you. For the average person in the average neighborhood, it may still suck paying your taxes, but it's pretty fair. It's when you don't have enough data. It's the edge cases where people do absolutely get screwed right and left, and it's not good. And you know what? Hey, that's what we're here for. That's what this is all about. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. And I am going to stay out of your hair. Values came out 3 days ago, so good luck getting sleep for the next 30 days or so, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, reach out anytime, Chandler. Thank y'all so much.
Cool. See ya.